An officer walks up to your car, not for a ticket, not for a warning.
Where to?
He asks if you can give him a lift somewhere, or asks to sit inside for a moment. It sounds harmless, even helpful, but the second you say yes, you may have just given up more legal protection than you realize. Give me a few minutes and I'll explain exactly what happens legally the moment you let an officer into your vehicle voluntarily, why this scenario is more common than people think, and the exact way to handle it without seeming rude or suspicious. Here's the first thing almost nobody understands about this situation. The moment an officer is physically inside your car, sitting in the passenger seat, waiting while you drive somewhere, or even just leaning in to grab something, anything visible from that position is considered plain view. That means anything they see, whether it's related to why they're there or not, can potentially become the basis for a whole new situation you didn't see coming. The first mistake people make is agreeing immediately because saying no feels rude or confrontational. Officers are people too, and the instinct to be helpful is natural. But politeness in this specific context can quietly cost you legal protections that exist specifically to keep officers out of your vehicle without a warrant or genuine probable cause. The second mistake is assuming that because the officer initiated the request, anything found afterward doesn't count the same way. It does. Consent is consent, regardless of who asked first. The moment you agree, you've essentially opened the door yourself, legally speaking, even if it felt like you were just being a good citizen. The third mistake is trying to quickly hide or move something once the officer is already close to getting in. Any sudden movement in that moment reads as suspicious and can escalate a simple, unusual request into a search of your entire vehicle based on behavior rather than anything that was actually there to begin with. The fourth mistake, and this one is subtle, engaging in casual conversation once they're inside, thinking it builds goodwill. Casual conversation in this specific setting isn't casual at all. It's still an interaction with law enforcement, and anything said can still become part of a report, even if the tone felt friendly and informal the entire time. Here's what you say instead, and how to say it without sounding difficult. If an officer asks to sit inside your vehicle or requests a ride, you can simply say, "I'd rather not, but is there something specific I can help with from outside the vehicle?" This isn't rude, it's a polite redirection that keeps the interaction outside your car, where your protections remain strongest, while still showing you're willing to help in a reasonable way. Let's talk about why this actually matters legally, because understanding the mechanics makes this easier to remember under pressure. Your vehicle carries meaningful Fourth Amendment protection. Officers generally need a warrant, your consent, or genuine probable cause to search it. The moment you voluntarily invite someone in, even with good intentions, you've sidestepped that entire protection without anyone forcing you to. Now, this doesn't mean every interaction like this is dangerous or has bad intentions behind it. Most of the time, an officer asking for something unusual is exactly what it looks like. An unusual, harmless situation. But because you can't know in the moment which kind of situation you're in, keeping the interaction outside your vehicle protects you regardless of the officer's actual intent. Here's a related scenario worth understanding because it comes up in a similar way. An officer asks if they can just hop in for a second to grab warmth, check something on a phone charger, or wait out weather. It feels like a small human request, but the moment that happens, the same plain view rule applies. If there's ever a reason for a report to be written afterward, for any unrelated reason, what was visible from inside your car during that time can become part of it. Let's expand on this with a scenario that trips people up even more. What if the request isn't about the officer getting in, but about you giving someone else a ride at an officer's suggestion? Imagine a scenario where an officer says, "This person needs a ride to the station, would you mind taking them?" This feels like community service, like you're doing something genuinely good. But now there's a third party inside your vehicle, someone you don't know, in a situation initiated by law enforcement. If anything goes wrong during that ride, or if that passenger has anything on them, your vehicle and your name are now connected to a situation you had no real control over. Politely declining and suggesting the officer arrange transportation through proper channels protects you from being unknowingly pulled into someone else's legal situation entirely. There's another angle worth understanding here: what this looks like from the officer's perspective, because it actually makes the interaction easier to navigate. Officers are trained to build easy compliance into routine requests, not necessarily with bad intent, but because voluntary cooperation is simply easier than the paperwork and process required for a formal search or request. Understanding that this is often about convenience, not suspicion, helps take the emotional weight off your decision to decline. You're not accusing anyone of anything by keeping the interaction outside your car. You're simply maintaining a boundary that exists for good reason, regardless of who's asking. Let's also address something people wonder about. What if refusing feels awkward in a small town or a situation where you'll likely see this officer again? Handling it politely matters here. I appreciate you asking, but I'd rather keep this outside the car. Said calmly and respectfully doesn't damage a relationship. It simply sets a clear, reasonable boundary that most reasonable people, including most officers, will understand and respect. If, despite a polite decline, the situation continues or escalates, you do not physically block access or argue extensively. You remain calm, you comply with clear instructions if given, and you save any concerns about how the interaction was handled for later, through proper channels rather than trying to resolve it in the moment. Here's something worth understanding about timing as well. These requests tend to happen in specific circumstances: bad weather, late at night, in areas without easy access to other transportation, or during unusual local situations like road closures or emergencies. Recognizing that the circumstances themselves might be creating pressure to say yes quickly is useful. You're allowed to take 3 seconds to think, even in an unusual moment, before responding. After any unusual interaction like this, documentation matters. Write down what was asked, how you responded, whether the request seemed unusual for the situation, and the time and location it happened. If anything felt off about the encounter, having this written down close to when it happened makes it significantly more useful later than trying to remember details weeks afterward. Note whether there were other witnesses nearby, whether it was recorded on any nearby cameras, and whether the officer identified themselves clearly at any point. Here's the core principle to take away from all of this. You're allowed to be polite, cooperative, and respectful without giving up meaningful legal protections in the process. Keeping interactions outside your vehicle isn't about assuming bad intent. It's about maintaining the same level of protection regardless of how routine or harmless a situation initially seems. The goal isn't to treat every officer with suspicion. It's to understand that good intentions on both sides don't change what the law actually allows once consent has been given. This video is for educational purposes only, based on general principles of US law. I'm not a licensed attorney, and this is not legal advice. For your specific situation, consult a licensed attorney in your state. Subscribe for more videos breaking down situations most people never think to prepare for until they're already happening.